Welcome to episode 37 of the G2 on 5G. It's the latest inside scoop on everything 5G. We cover 6 topics in about 15 minutes, and it's brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. I'm Will Townsend, and joining me again this week is my fellow analyst, Anshel Sag. So let's get started. My first topic is around earnings. And so over the last week, AT&T and Verizon reported earnings. So from AT&T's perspective, a couple of highlights. They noted 800,000 net new postpaid subscribers, which is a decade record. And they also saw positive revenue growth, even given the challenges with COVID-19 and the pandemic. Verizon, on the other hand, from my perspective, a little bit weaker. They actually lost ground in subscribers, although revenue, I believe, met expectations. And, T-Mobile will be reporting earnings on February 4th next week. One of my hypotheses is that T-Mobile is taking more share from Verizon than from AT&T. So there's absolutely some share shift going on. We've talked about T-Mobile in the past. They've been very aggressive. They've been first to a lot of things, first to stand alone with 5G. They definitely have the best coverage with respect to 5G relative to their tier one peers. Mm-hmm. And, it'll just be interesting to see how, kind of things roll out. And I'm wondering, do you have any additional insights you'd like to share?
Yeah, I was looking at AT&T's earnings pretty closely, and I noticed that it seems like their traditional carrier business is doing well.
Yes.
And they seem to have kind of gotten their act together in that business, which I think they were having some issues with in the last couple of years. And I think it helps that they have a new CEO who's been focusing on that. Mm-hmm. But I think both Verizon and AT&T still have these media investments, and I'm kind of curious to see how they're going to address them if they are reprioritizing the network and the network side of things, and how are they going to better leverage content than they have in the past, because AT&T has been hemorrhaging on their DirecTV acquisition, and there were rumors that they might even spin it off or sell it to somebody. So it's interesting because both Verizon and AT&T were the ones who really made a big media push and spent a lot of money on that. And T-Mobile has too, but nowhere near to the degree that AT&T and Verizon have.
Yeah, no, I agree. And when you look at the 3 tier ones in the U.S., certainly AT&T has the most potential with respect to content. When you look at Warner Media. And it's no secret that AT&T has been very aggressive launching its Max streaming service, and offering things like access to the latest Wonder Woman movie both online as it was released in theaters as well. So I agree with you. That's a crown jewel for AT&T. I don't think they've done a great job leveraging that, but moving forward, based on what you're saying, you're saying, cable companies are hemorrhaging. The Comcast of the world are looking at cellular to diversify its portfolio because they understand, the whole content scenario there. And it'll be quite interesting to see, what happens. I think. T-Mobile, they don't have really a rich library, although I know prior to the merger, Sprint was in a relationship with a streaming service to offer, consumer music and, video content. But certainly, I think they can all do a much better job of leveraging that. So we'll definitely keep our eyes on that. Let's move to your first topic this week, and you want to talk about global smartphone market share.
Yeah, so smartphone market share is a thing that's hotly contested and hotly watched by the industry. And now 5G has become a very crucial element of what smartphone market share looks like. And what's really interesting is that we're seeing big jumps and market shifts due to 5G, but also due to sanctions. Huawei's market share plunged quite a bit by 21% actually in 2020 versus 2019. So they really took a big hit. And Samsung also took a hit of about 10%, while Apple gained 8% and Xiaomi gained 17%. And I would say Xiaomi and Samsung have been the most aggressive in implementing 5G, but I also believe that Apple has been too with the iPhone 12 and enabling 5G across all versions of the iPhone 12. So if you look at it, the top vendors are all very much in on 5G now, and 5G has become an aggressive component of the smartphone industry's growth in 2020. And these numbers have lots of nuance in them, but it's interesting to see that Apple's market share has surpassed Samsung's in global shipments. They shipped 90 million phones in Q4, while Samsung shipped 73 million, Xiaomi shipped 43, Oppo shipped 33, and Huawei came in fifth at 32. Wow. So that's just Q4, but overall 2020, it was Samsung still held on to number one place for the whole year. Apple had second, Huawei had third, Xiaomi had fourth, and Vivo had fifth. So there's been some shifts, some moves. It also has to do with when devices launch, right? When their new devices come out. But yeah, it's been very interesting, and I'm excited to see what 2021 has to hold.
Yeah, I agree. And, I cover infrastructure, you cover end device, but, Apple's recent earnings were just a blockbuster, right?
Totally. The biggest ever.
The biggest ever. And, certainly there was a lot of pent up demand for that iPhone 12 with the 5G support. In fact, I'll be getting a demo of the new iPhone 12 courtesy of AT&T. So thank you, AT&T. I'll be testing that out. But yeah, it's no surprise, that Huawei has stumbled, and it's just, it's based on the entity listing, it's, based on, just the fact that they haven't been able to be as competitive, from a supply chain perspective.
In Q4 of 2019, they shipped 56.2 million devices, smartphones mostly. Well, this is smartphones, but they went from 56.2 to 32.3, basically half.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do. I mean, I've read lots of rumors about, bailouts and that sort of thing. I mean, they did offload their Honor line, right, which is their value line,
which does affect which also affects. I think Honor does get counted as part of Huawei's market share.
I imagine it does. So that probably accounts for a lot of it. But yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of keep tabs on this and see, how things move forward. I mean, Huawei makes a great device. And it's, unfortunately, they've been the victim of, these sanctions, under the previous administration. And there's no real indication that the Biden administration is going to change its stance. But, obviously time will tell. But well, let's move on to my second topic, and I want to talk about Ericsson. And they reported earnings this week, and they beat expectations. And they point to lots of 5G wins from an infrastructure perspective, and some allude to Huawei's ban as well in the infrastructure space. I was doing a little bit of the analysis, and, not only, did the revenue beat expectations, but they've gotten their margins now above 40 points on average, which that took them almost 10 years to recover. They were in the 20s, and so they've managed to recover, even amid, all the discussion around Open RAN and disaggregation and how disruptive that's going to be from, a CapEx and an OpEx perspective. But certainly Open RAN kind of came late to the 5G party. Many, if not all, carriers globally were already in the midst of deploying their 5G plan. So in that Forbes article that I wrote a couple of weeks ago with my predictions, certainly we're going to see lots of, proof of concepts with Open RAN, that sort of thing. Again, Open RAN may not be optimized for performance, and obviously that's pretty critical when you look at, certain applications that require ultra low latency and that sort of thing. But it'll be interesting to see if they can continue the momentum, because they've been sort of, kind of, peak and valley, sort of over the years. And, I'm wondering, do you have any additional insights you'd like to share there?
Yeah, I mean, based on my thoughts of how Ericsson's business works, I don't feel like Ericsson has benefited as much from the Huawei sanctions as, say, Samsung and Nokia have.
Hmm.
Because I think a lot of Ericsson's customers are customers that they've already had, that may have just expanded how much Ericsson equipment they buy.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that Ericsson has not traditionally been in an area where they compete with Huawei necessarily on the network infrastructure side,
Hmm.
because the prices are so different.
Yeah.
And price is a huge component of that. But I mean, they're still competitive with each other just because they're in the same market, they sell the same equipment.
Yeah.
They're still going to be, negotiating for the same tenders. Um, but I would also say that I think what I've noticed is Ericsson has been getting a lot more core wins. And I
Hmm.
think those core wins are what's driving a lot of this.
Yeah. No, I would agree with you. Nokia reports earnings on February 4th, the same day that T-Mobile does as well. And so I'll probably cover some of that in the podcast that we conduct next week. But we'll definitely keep our eyes open and, provide, insight and feedback as things move forward this year. Let's move to your second topic, and you want to talk about 5G modems and their growth. And that kind of dovetails into your first topic this week, right?
Yeah, so the GSA always puts out reports, and usually they do a report on chipsets and things like that.
Hmm.
And they came up with a 5G chipset update, kind of talking about that 5G modems specifically have actually doubled in numbers, more than doubled in numbers. So
Hmm.
um,
No surprise.
essentially, the
Yeah.
number of discrete 5G modems has more than doubled in 2020, and the number of 5G processors and platforms grew ninefold. So um, it's basically showing that there's an explosion of 5G devices. It's
Hmm.
exponential in growth,
Yeah.
and that makes total sense, I think, to anyone who's been, watching the market grow in 2020 and
Hmm.
seeing how it started and how little the pandemic really affected 5G's growth. In
Yeah.
fact, it may have even been a boosting effect.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I view that as, like future investment protection, as, people are, upgrading, their devices, they want the latest and greatest. And I had this conversation with my girlfriend's mother in Kansas City. And, I was telling her, it's like, you may not feel like, you need 5G. She probably doesn't even understand what it's all about, but that's just going to provide you with future investment protection as new services come online and that sort of thing. So yeah, no surprise. I mean, 2020 really laid the foundation, the bedrock from my perspective, from a device standpoint.
Mhm.
And as we enter this year, I think it's only going to accelerate further. So the GSA, GSMA as well, they all provide lots of important, kind of data points and that sort of thing to sort of point to these inflections in the market.
Mhm.
And I think we'll continue to see that ramp, certainly through
Totally.
this year. Yeah. So let's move to my third topic this week. And I want to talk about Dell Technologies. They've partnered with VMware, and obviously VMware is part of the portfolio there,
Mhm.
and SK Telecom. And we've talked about SK Telecom on prior podcasts, a very innovative carrier in the South Korean market. They've all come together to deliver a simplified platform around mobile edge computing. And what they're calling it is the one box mech. And what they're trying to do is sort of simplify that deployment and make it super simple. And so obviously SK Telecom is the carrier that's participating in this collaboration. I'm sure this is going to get extended out to other carriers as well. it was interesting. They did commission a report. It was called the STL Partner Study, and we can provide that link on at the end of the podcast here. But commissioned by all three companies as well as Intel, and they verified information that we're already quite aware of. 40% of enterprises surveyed had issues with latency on their current networks. 61% of those surveyed experienced performance issues. And they also, surveyed hospitals for patient monitoring systems. 45%, I mean, almost half expressed concerns over reliability. And if you think about that in a healthcare setting, and given what our healthcare professionals are having to deal with COVID-19, that's simply unacceptable. So I think this is a great opportunity to sort of simplify that. I mean, mobile edge computing can be very complicated, and where do enterprises start? And so I think, Dell Technologies and VMware are bringing a solution to market that's going to help with that. So any additional thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working with Dell Technologies for a long time, and I've been paying attention to a lot of the VMware momentum on Mac and in general 5G, and it seems like it makes sense to have. I mean, this is a combination. I think that is one of the reasons why Dell Technologies has been so successful as a company, and they're basically taking advantage of Dell Technologies hardware experience and knowledge in carrier infrastructure and VMware's knowledge and experience in carrier infrastructure and combining it as a complete solution. And there just aren't very many companies in the world that have the ability to do that other than Ericsson and Nokia. So it's very interesting to see more competition coming to market with the advent of 5G. And I hope to see more of this from other companies that really allows choice and innovation in the Mac space, because I think it's going to be necessary for prices to come down to a point where it's viable for CSPs and others to make the investment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Our firm did a multi-part series on who was leading in 5G. That was back in 2018, 2019. I looked at infrastructure providers. I looked at the traditional guys like the Ericssons, Nokias, Huawei's of the world, and then looked at folks like Dell EMC, Lenovo, Cisco, that are taking more of a disaggregated approach to things to sort of drive that CapEx line. Keep your eyes on Dell Technologies. They're doubling down on their telco go to market. I think you're going to see a lot more come from them. I'll also mention HPE as well. Their telco team is doing some pretty, amazing things, with respect to sort of simplifying 5G. And also all of this bodes really well for private networking. And that's one of the aims of this partnership between the three companies is, to enable, the rapid deployment of private 5G networking. So I think it's exciting. I think to your point, it provides an alternative path choice, and it's just going to provide more, flexibility for operators to deploy what's a pretty complicated scenario. So with that, let's move to your third and final topic this week. With earnings, the earnings seasons comes all of the claims around performance and who's leading, right? And you want to talk about some carrier shenanigans. So I'll let you take it.
Yeah. So how do I put this? Every carrier
claims are the fastest, right?
This month claims they're the fastest 5G network in the country.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, there's three companies that most people trust to give network performance statistics. Those are OpenSignal, RootMetrics, and Ookla Speed Test. Now, RootMetrics does not take user data. They generate data themselves.
Yeah. They drive around in their own little vehicles, right?
Correct. And OpenSignal takes user data as well as speed test. So OpenSignal and Ookla, in my opinion, have more user data, but there are opportunities for the data to be flawed. Yeah. And RootMetrics is not real user data; it's real world data But I will say that from my experience, RootMetrics has a history of giving Verizon wins. So it might be their methodology. And that's the thing with this situation right now. We have three different operators claiming to be the fastest 5G network, when in reality, I think it's very close. And I think that may be why we see this, because as Verizon rolled out their DSS low band to give coverage to their 5G users, it really brought their performance down significantly, right? Because they were really leveraging millimeter wave. And T-Mobile is starting to roll out their mid band, which is bringing them down from their 600 megahertz low band, and is propping up their speeds. And then you have AT&T, who's kind of been sitting in the middle the whole time. And I mean, it's interesting because now it's like, okay, so we got Open Signal saying AT&T is the fastest. I'm sorry, Open Signal saying T-Mobile's the fastest. Then we have Ookla saying AT&T is the fastest. And then we have RootMetrics saying Verizon's the fastest. And in reality, I'd say it's a wash at this point. But I do believe that in the long term, and by long term, I mean this year, I think T-Mobile is going to blow all of them away. And it's going to be because they're already deploying their 2.5 gigahertz network. And from what I've seen on their network in San Diego, it's not even officially launched here yet. I'm seeing anywhere from 300 to 600 megabits per second. And that's very fast. And if that becomes the regular for T-Mobile's users, AT&T and Verizon will have nothing to compete with. So it's going to be interesting. AT&T and Verizon are obviously bidding on C-band, mid-band spectrum, as we've discussed before. But that's going to probably take at least a year, because that auction hasn't even ended yet. So, and there's the clearing process, and then there's the build out. So realistically, they probably won't start building out for another year and a half, and then they probably won't have it fully deployed for another 2 years. So they're behind, and they know it, and that's why they're spending the money. But nevertheless, at this moment in time, which is really what these things are, at this moment in time, I would say the carriers are kind of even. But I think this year it will most likely be T-Mobile's year.
Yeah. And the other thing to note too is, T-Mobile was first to standalone. And, for our viewers and listeners, that's marrying that 5G core with that 5G RAN. And that delivers the true benefit of 5G versus
low latency and high
non-standalone.
speed. Yeah.
Exactly, versus non-standalone, which is that interim step where the carriers are going out there and they're first upgrading those towers, the radio access network, to 5G, and then bringing the core online. And so, not that AT&T and Verizon won't eventually catch up and deploy standalone. They will, but T-Mobile definitely has the lead there. So I would tend to agree with you. It'll be interesting to see how it sort of all shakes out. If AT&T or Verizon infuse those deployments, it requires lots of densification, which is quite expensive. They might write the big checks to catch up. But yeah, I would, at this point in the year, it is just, we're entering February. I would tend to kind of tip my hat to T-Mobile, but it'll be interesting to see how things sit 6 months from now.
So one of the things you mentioned, standalone, and one thing I wanted to pull up, I have it on my phone here. This is a speed test of T-Mobile's low band 5G. This is not millimeter wave, which millimeter wave has great latency, but this is low band, and I have 17 millisecond ping on this device. What the screen
That's crazy.
But 17 millisecond ping, that's like wired connection latency. And
just for our viewers, in an LTE world, that latency has been about 50 milliseconds, right? So that's a dramatic improvement. Yeah,
I can game on that.
Yeah. No, it's unbelievable at that spectrum band.
And so, I was looking through my speed test results a couple days ago, just thinking about it. Like, okay, what is it really now after the launch? It's low 20s, high teens most of the time, and that changes how applications are utilized. So I think it'll be really. I really hope to see Verizon and AT&T roll out their standalone very soon.
Yeah, no, and they will. It's just a matter of time. So, but hey, buddy, another great podcast this week. Why don't you take us home?
Absolutely. We hope our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If anyone out there would like to reach out to us and provide a specific insight on a specific 5G topic for a future podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will is at Will Town Tech, and I'm at Anshel. We hope you have a great weekend, and please tune in again next time.